So let's get started with the next session. We got David DeGraff, who's going to be talking about teaching with this stuff. David, take it away.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Let's do that and share it. So, yeah, there we go. So I'm going to be talking about, my talk was about using aliens to teach evolution. And my main reason for doing that is it seems that there's a lot of resistance to evolution in the classroom. But I found after I'd done this a few times that people were a lot more open to the idea of aliens having evolution because it didn't apply to us. So they were more open to looking at it. I've got two classes where I do that. There's the regular Life in the Universe class using the Bennett Shostak book. But I also teach a class on science and science fiction. And Julie Trineda has fantastic aliens. Survival has a main character of a scientist. So they get to see a scientist who, whenever she's confronted with something unknown, she always tries to come up with a hypothesis. So that's really good. And so I gave some examples of some aliens that my students built. And yeah, one of the early ones was this one, which is clearly earthbound, a vertebrate. I don't know if it actually looks very mammalian, but it's aquatic, but it didn't have the joined hind segments, which all creatures who've been on the land and gone back into the water, they've all had joined rear limbs, I think. The Loch Ness Monster type one, I'm not so sure about, but most of them seem to have done that. So I point out that you want to not be so Earth-like and use more convergent evolution for their things. And here was one that has convergent evolution looking like a skate or a ray, but instead of being based on a worm, it's based on something with the stomach's more like a lung, where it's just one opening where things come in and go out, like jellyfish and coral and sponges. And here was a couple that had, clearly there's a common ancestor with the 6 limbs and the hoods and the 3 eyes and the vertical mouth. But there's convergent evolution with the changing placement of the eyes and going to having free hands, which has happened over and over again on Earth. So it's likely to happen in some other places. And I had some really unique aliens that showed up. I was really upset when this one fell apart. The mouth is on the bottom of the saucer, and the tubes are suspending the tennis ball with 4 eyes up at the top. So there's 4 pieces to the mouth on the bottom. And there's tubes for stuff coming in and going out, and then there's muscles for the other tubes, and they can bounce around. I give them a bunch of different planets. It's always a different set of planets with different properties. There's one time I gave them a planet that left the habitable zone and went back into the habitable zone. So there was, migration wasn't an option to get rid of it. And the student came up with hair that alternated between being an insulator and a radiator. So I thought that was pretty cool. So those are some different things that I've done in my classes, and some things that students have come up with that. And I really like this idea. I started doing it in one of the classes, and then I switched to doing it to both of my science fictional classes, and with slightly different emphasis. The creature in Survival is an R strategy reproduction creature. And so its culture is very different from ours. So in the science fiction class, I try to get them to focus more on how the biology affects the culture, so they can see that humans have things that are determined by our biology. So I'm not letting them completely get away that it's only something for aliens, and I do bring it back to people and try to get them to do that. So I'll stop sharing my screen now. And questions? Yeah, I've used so there's a question in the chat about Bartlett's Guide to Extraterrestrials, and I do use that.
I'll wait to be recognized.
Sorry, guys, I forgot I was muted. So Robert, I've been trying to call on you. Go ahead.
I really like this approach. Curious, do your students have any required reading or not? So like Mission of Gravity or The Sparrow, or think, different bodies make different minds would be good.
Yes.
But on the other hand, not reading, you might get some things that no one would have thought of otherwise.
Yeah, the science fiction class is all reading science fiction. There's a short story every day, and a week for the novels, which is a lot of complaint about that there's too much reading. When the English majors start complaining that they have too much reading, it's like, maybe I better give some more time to that. But the science fiction class has reading about different aliens. And the Life in the Universe class, I don't have any outside reading. And I think most of those are from the Life in the Universe class.
Okay, Eric?
Yeah, thanks. Really interesting. I have some practical questions. But do you have the students doing this together in class, or is it like a homework assignment? And also, how much time do you set off for this?
Yeah, this is a presentation instead of one of the papers. So I give them a choice. They can either do 3 or 4 papers and a test, or do 4 tests and write a paper. They don't want to write a paper. There's one of the papers is a presentation. So I set aside one evening in the semester where they all come together for 15-minute presentations for doing these. And it's an outside assignment, but I have them come and talk to me at several points along the way so we can talk about what they're doing so they can develop it and I can steer them along the way. And this is in the Life in the Universe class. This is assigned at the beginning of when we start talking about life on Earth, and the section of the Bennett Shostak book with that deals with the history of life on Earth, and I have them imagining things going differently. And in the science fiction class, so that's a quarter of the class period, and this is at about a week after the end of that. And in the science fiction class, sometimes it's a third of the class is aliens, sometimes it's a quarter. I have them choose the topics they want to look at. And if there's a lot of things that a lot of people are interested in, lots of things, but there's no real big consensus like, oh, we want to do this, then there's more topics. And if there's a lot of people are choosing a small number of topics, then we go into more detail with those things.
Okay, Nick?
I've already partially answered some of my questions, but like Eric's practical questions, I'm curious if you're mostly teaching college freshmen, and how long approximately does it take before you see the light bulb go on and they get a realization of how evolution functions?
Yeah, so I do this both as a freshman only class as part of the first year experience program. I alternate between these two classes. So first I teach it to just a freshman, and then in the spring, I teach to just a regular general education class, and I do it there. And I wish I had more. If I was doing this as an in-classroom activity, then I think that might be more valuable. So I may move to doing stuff in the class like that. And did I just disappear? Okay. So having things happen in the classroom more, I think, would be a more effective way of doing this, instead of just sending them off to do it. That's why I have them come back at me, and there's sometimes they won't come see me, and I do get some pretty horrible presentations that show up. But the ones who do come and see me and do really care about it, there seems to be a lot of leveling up as they go as they work on it.
Okay, John?
Yeah, thank you, David. This was really cool. I made steel list for the classes I TA for at Arizona State. I think my question is, how do you balance the creativity versus evolution? Like something like, obviously the mammalian, it doesn't have that much creativity, but it's something that, like, if it has bone structure, it could theoretically exist. Like, and the eye thing was really cool. It's really creative. Like, how do you balance that, like, those two ideas?
We have Alfred University is a very strange school. We have the New York State College of Ceramics is one of the colleges in the university, and that has a School of Engineering and a School of Art and Design. So I get a mix of art students and engineering students and business students, along with the regular liberal arts students. So it's a really nice, diverse mix in there. So I try to encourage groups where it's not all art students and not all engineers working together, and try to mix them up that way. But one of the goals that I have in my class is to show the creative side of science. Too many people come into science saying, it's like, no, I'm a creative person. I don't like all this cut and dried stuff. And I don't do cut and dried stuff in my classes, or at least I try not to. So I encourage them to be as creative as they can, but I liken it to formal poetry, where they've got to have, a sonnet has to have the 14 lines and the 2 or 3 different stanzas, and playing, and there's the Frost line about playing with the net down. So I say, be as creative with it as you want, but keep the net up, and you can be creative within these constraints. And I try to use the poetry analogy with that one.
Okay, Daniela?
Yes, thanks, Kelly. And thanks, David, for the really great talk and presentation. I have more of a comment than a question, perhaps. I was really also provoked by the previous talk about progress, and I'm just wondering if you have maybe, if you can suggest a parallel between evolution and progress. Is there any connection between the two? I mean, in the terms themselves seem to suggest some kind of progress. But is perhaps evolution an example of progress that is a circular dynamic rather than, you know, linear one? Thanks.
Yeah, I try to, when I'm talking about how things have gone on Earth in the Life in the Universe class, I definitely push the idea of pruning of a bush. And as you snip off branches, the ones that keep growing spread out more. So I try not to link the idea of evolution as progress, and show that it's just things change and they go their own way. And I talk about creatures losing abilities as they no longer need them. In the science fiction class, I don't emphasize that more. It's more of a connection between how biology affects their worldview. So I don't explicitly address or counter the notion of evolution as progress.
We can't hear you, Kelly.
Dadgummit. Okay, Sarah.
Hi, yeah, this is a really interesting class idea. I love it. I wondered if there's anything that you thought you were also like getting insights into about some of the common misconceptions about alien life and how it would involve, like, are there certain trends that you see that either reflect kind of things that we would already expect, or maybe some things that you found kind of surprising as stuff that your students tend to go to as a, oh, well, it would happen this way, that maybe you as a professional wouldn't normally consider as a possibility?
They really rush to teleological arguments. It's like, oh, they need to be able to do this, so this will happen. And so when I start seeing people veering off in that direction, I try to push them as like, well, how did that develop? Where was the original piece that got modified to be able to do that? So that's one of the major things that I see in there. And then the surprising part is when they're just saying, this is a bear. I had a space bear. And so those like, don't have any connection to Earth life at all. There's definitely going to be some convergent evolution. So space bunnies is totally a good thing. Organisms who exist solely to reproduce so they can be eaten. That happens. There's rabbits on land and anchovies in the sea, and lots of other things in different realms. So there's always, in any ecosystem, there's going to be one thing that exists because it's going to be eaten a lot. So having something like that on a planet, on an ecosystem, would be something that's I push them towards instead of the teleological stuff.
All right.